And as you just heard, this event is being recorded for future posterity. And what we do with the recordings is that we put them onto a special page or two special pages. One's hosted by blackhistorywalks, a YouTube channel, and the other is hosted by the U.C.L. Sarah Parker Remond Centre. So I mentioned I'd talk about some of the events coming up. These are some of them. And we have 22 events, mostly online, although of course some are physical. We have a Black History River Cruise, several Black History Walks, and a couple of cinema events as well. Those are all physical. But the ones you see here, these are all online. So we have a judge, who used to be a High Court judge, called Peter Herbert, who actually sued the legal system for racism and won, in effect. So we're going to hear from him on the 2nd September. We have an event looking at fibroids. A sister called Abby Bale has a health consultancy in the Caribbean. She's done new research on fibroids in the Caribbean, and she's going to share on the 4th of September. We got an event titled 20 banned Black films you need to see. And we'll be going through some of the films that have been banned by Black directors or featuring Black topics on the 5th of September with clips of the films, commentary about the films, and also where you can actually watch those films now, and you can read the rest for yourself. So we have events like the one you're seeing today or hearing today every single month of the year, all year long. This is just some of them. Now, you might have never ever heard about the Sarah Parker Remond Centre. Well, they're based at U.C.L. in central London. As it says there, the top paragraph, they were born out of student-led protests. So this is going back 2019, before George Floyd 2020. There were a number of movements around the country to actually have a diverse curriculum, to have Black staff on the academic delivery team. And this Sarah Parker Remond Centre comes out of student-led protests and demands. And they do a massive amount of work looking at the history of race and racialization. Now, the name Sarah Parker Remond may not be familiar to you, but here's a short video as to why the centre is called the Sarah Parker Remond Centre. Let's check this out.
Born in Salem, Massachusetts, a free state, Sarah's family were told they had to segregate. The Remonds believed that they must educate, but the best schools in Salem wouldn't integrate. They were self-made business people and activists, a family of upspoken worldly strategists. Their home was a hub for the abolitionist movement, a place and a space for self-improvement. The books that were shelved, the lectures that were held, the lodges that would dwell meant that Sarah was propelled. Their house was a home for those fleeing slave states, offering a place to stay and a chance to change fates, and Sarah's family would loudly advocate that no skin tone needed to dominate. Her parents made sure she understood the laws of liberty, that segregation and slavery could be pushed into history. Though at times Black people were outcast, a change would happen if they spoke up and were steadfast. Wade in the water. At sweet 16, Sarah starts to speak up. At abolitionist lectures, audiences were struck by her compelling voice and her grounded words. Her empathy and argument made slavery absurd. 1853, the moment Sarah takes a seat. At a theatre she sat, not giving in to defeat. She paid for a ticket, a front row treat. When she was asked to move, she refused to concede. The segregated seats for Black people was known as nigger heaven. Sarah, 26, had had enough of this oppression. She took the theatre to court, fought and won. The theatre had to integrate the seats and pay a $500 sum. Wade in the water, children, wade. In 1858, she sails the Atlantic to Liverpool, crossing the slave routes her ancestors sailed before. Back in America, white people saw her as something less, but in Britain she was accepted, as she confessed.
I have been received here as a sister by white women for the first time in my life. I have received a sympathy I was never offered before.
For 7 years she told shocking tales to audiences in Britain. From London to Warrington to Glasgow, all would listen. She didn't hold back on details that were gory. She knew it was essential to telling slave stories. Oh, God's gonna trouble the water. Then she came to Manchester, where cotton was king, and Sarah knew she had to really let her speech sing. She kept to the task and she didn't change track. quick to point out the profits being made on slave backs.
I ask you, raise the moral public opinion until its voice reaches the American shores. Aid us thus until the shackles of the American slave melt like dew before the morning sun. I ask for special help from the women of England. Women are the worst victims of slave power. I am met on every hand by the cry, cotton, cotton. I cannot stop to speak of cotton while women and men are being brutalized.
Audiences were taken in by the talk of racial injustice and slavery. Sarah was praised for her passion and for her bravery. Manchester heard the suffering of those across the sea and added their voices asking for people to be free. Sarah had talked of womanhood and family, of being treated like animals, a call for humanity. In the echoing chamber of the Athenaeum Lecture Hall, Manchester audiences were left enthralled.
Oh, God's gonna trouble the water.
Sarah always kept speaking up for the oppressed and maligned. The suffragist movement she also got behind. She moved to Florence, became a doctor, on to Rome, fell in love, got married, made Italy her home. She was a generous spirit and an outstanding speaker, a passionate learner and a humanitarian teacher. History can be rewritten even if the past remains the same. Let Sarah Parker Remond be a household name.
Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. Oh, God's gonna trouble the water. Oh, God's gonna trouble the water.
All right, so Sarah Parker Remond is not a household name, at least not yet, which is why we're kind of promoting her a lot. This video helps to explain why the centre is named after her. So I got to shout out Vanessa Scott and Felicity Goodman for making the video in the first place. And I can also tell you that we are in the process of putting up a plaque, a Nubian Jack Black History plaque in honor of Sarah Parker Remond. We're just waiting for permission, or permissions, I should say, from the various authorities, and that plaque will be going up somewhere in central London in the near future. So watch out for that. So you can find the Sarah Parker Remond Centre online. You can just Google the name, will come up. You can follow them on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever. They have events like this on a regular basis. In fact, this is one of their events. We're working together on this particular one. But they also have lectures which they organize themselves, which you can find on their website. And here are some of them. So they have a lot of really high profile speakers. They do podcasts, and it's a regular thing all year long. This is what they do. So you can check out some of their pioneering and very interesting research on their website. Just Google Sarah Parker Remond Centre and it will come up. As far as Black History Walks is concerned, on that lovely collage there, you can see a sample of our work over the last 15 years now. It's actually 20 years of showing films, and then 15 years of doing guided Black History Walks, talks, films, busters, reviews, etc. But that's just a little sample of what we do. It's, as it says in the tin there, walks, talks, and films of Black history all year long. We got 12 different walks, north, east, south, west London. And basically, we take people on a 2-hour walk into and we show them all the African Caribbean history that's in the streets and the architecture building, because there's just loads of it all across the place. And that is the cinema we use in the bottom right-hand corner, the BFI South Bank. Top right-hand corner is one of the lecture venues we use. That's Birkbeck, actually. I think we're doing stuff on hair, history of African hair there. And the bottom left refers to our river cruise, which is coming up shortly. Actually, we have one at the end of August. That one is full, but there's another one on the 3rd of October, which has room on it. Now, today, we're not going to talk much about our book today, but we have a book coming out called Black History Walks in London, Volume 1. We basically took 2.5 of our walks and put the walks into a book form with about 400 pictures, 95,000 words. It's basically a guided tour of the Black history in certain streets in London. But that's coming out shortly from Jacaranda Books, which you can find online as well. But today, we're going to hear from Dr. Michelle Asantewa. She's going to speak to us about African spirituality in London, and she's the best person to hear that information from because she's got a PhD in literature, and she's specialist in what is called Comfer. Now, you might not have heard of Comfer before, but Comfer is an aspect of Guyanese, or I should actually say African spirituality, which can still be found practiced in Guyana. And she publishes her own books, and she writes her own books, and she's a course leader on 2 of our courses, Amazing James Baldwin and African Women Resistance Leaders. So we're going to hear from her for about an hour or so roughly. Then I'll come back and say a few things about what's coming up. And then we'll have a Q&A, question answer session with Dr. Michelle Asantewa. So we're going to hear from her for an hour. Then I'll come back and say a few words. Then we'll have a Q&A with Dr. Michelle Asantewa. But without further ado, I'm going to stop speaking and hand over to Dr. Michelle Asantewa.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone. I hope you can see me all right and hear me all right. More to the point, I just need to my mind why I've got 2 me's that I can see. Tony, I don't know if you can see that I've got a Dr. Michelle Asantewa signed in. I don't know.
That's interesting. I can see that other person. I presume that's something to do with you. If not, I can just remove it if you want me to. But I don't want to take out the wrong.
Yeah, it's just confusing me as to why it's me. So there's echo. I wonder if it's because I also clicked that link. So maybe remove the one where you can't see me.
All right, I'm gonna I'm gonna change that person. So that should disappear shortly.
Because people are hearing an echo and they can't. Can you see me now?
Yeah, it's just you now, Michelle. There's nobody else but you. Or you and me, actually.
Oh, it's nobody else but me.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at one of the attendees. Vanessa, can you see me? Who said she could not see me? Can you see me now, Vanessa, or anybody?
I can see. So if people can't see, you need to either log out and log back in, or try another aspect of access, because when it comes to seeing you, not seeing, most people can actually see you. So that suggests it's like her laptop or her connection. So people can see you, so you can go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. At the moment, most of them are saying they can see me. Hurrah! Actually, I had intended to keep my camera off, but now I feel compelled to keep it on now that I've asked you if you can see me. All right, anyway, thank you everybody and welcome to this session. Welcome to those of you who've returned, having probably seen some of this or versions of this presentation previously. So yeah, greetings everybody. I can see some of you flashing up and I recognize you. Carl Williams, that is you indeed. Greetings. So okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I'll ask Tony if he can see that. If I need to, I will turn my camera off just because there might be some kind of distraction that I need to monitor. But just please bear with me while I do that. And again, let me see if you can see the screen. And let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, we've got you in the river with your friends, or some of your friends, I should think. Okay. Sunday 8th of August, you're good to go.
Great. All right, let me just see there. So I just need to have that there as well. All right, so yeah, so welcome to this presentation of spirituality in London, which is it's an adaptation of lots of different presentation on the same theme. This is me, as Tony has just introduced. I like to show these 2 images of myself, especially because I am here donning the impression of Mami Wata or Wata Mama for a photo shoot, which was prior to then editing this anthology on your well, on my right or left. And so yeah, so Mami Wata is an African water spirit or an energy force of water, and I have a particular affinity with her, as I hope this presentation will show. Tony mentioned my publication, or briefly mentioned some of my publication, which you can look on the website and find out more about. But it already started in some ways with my dissertation PhD around Guyanese Kamfa, which is an African-derived spiritual practice, which has links with loads of others in the diaspora. This is the Guyanese version, but of course there are versions in Cuba, there are versions in the USA, there are versions in Jamaica, Trinidad, Brazil, you name it. Wherever there are African peoples, Puerto Rico, there are African-derived spiritual traditions and systems remaining in retention. So I was here just looking at this version, and that came about through a long process, which again, we don't have time to go into, but that long process certainly involved me kind of being called into that tradition and to try and look at that tradition as part of my study. And I, as the Eventbrite page had informed you, organized this annual ritual to honor the Orisha Osun, and the next of these will be next week, actually, this time next week, Sunday, which I will hope to then give you some information about what that is as I go along. I wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge or to pay tribute to Baba Runoko Rashidi, who passed away earlier this week. For those of you who do not know who this brilliant scholar, historian, anthropologist is, I encourage you to go on and look at him. And a lot of my coming into realization of the depth of African spirituality and African indigenous system will have references and connections with some of these scholars, these historians who have been doing this work for decades. On the picture where you can see with the gentleman behind him, that's when he was here in 2018, which was the last time I saw him in the UK. But he came to the UK often, and he led tours around the British Museum showing African artifacts. And so it's a tremendous loss and gain. From an African perspective, we kind of think of him as merging back with the ancestors. You know, here you can see he says here, you never travel alone once you have an understanding of the African ancestors and the African spiritual systems. You never really think of death in the same way as you would also coming out of a Western cultural perspective. So although we mourn, especially if the loss is of a young person, at the same time, when somebody like Runoko Rashidi has done what we think he's done, such tremendous work of vast proportions, you think, well, actually, you've lived so many lives over, and now you are merging back. He passed away in Egypt, which was where his work was. So this is particularly interesting and ominous for a lot of us who are practicing this tradition. I just also wanted us to take a moment to listen to this kind of chant, if you like, and observe the slideshow around libation, which is another aspect of African spirituality, and I'll explain it afterwards.
Come
Okay, so thank you for that. That's just to remind you that as African celebrating or acknowledging their spirituality would often and always actually begin their sessions with a pouring of libation to our ancestors to ensure that continuation with the invisible and the material realms, and to acknowledge their worth and their presence in our life, because we as the quotation from Brother Renuka Rashidi was saying, they are always with us. And I wanted to start off with that because I don't know why it's just doing that prompt. This book here by Dr. Kamani Nhusi is where you'll find some information about libation for those of you who are interested. The picture that's on the left, I don't know why it keeps moving, is a form of pouring of libation impression, fine artist Alvin Kofi's dedication, and these other two, I can't keep it still. The other two images are also impressions of libations. But basically here, from that book, Dr. Kamani Nhusi, who now resides and teaches in the US, but actually for many years, he taught in the UK. And the first time I saw libation being poured, I can't remember, it was several years ago, and it was at the beginning of, again, another event, and he was the one leading it. Ultimately, he would then go on many years later to write this book. I think he'd been writing the book quite a long time. But it says here that libation is an important everyday ritual in which Africans regularly acknowledge and symbolically unite all beings and things in eternity. The motivation for doing libation is provided by the compulsion to maintain the appropriate relationships or connections with those yet to come, with those who are living, with the ancestors, with those yet to come, with the lesser divinities, with the creator, and with the physical environment that he, she made and in which we live. It's important I say this because sometimes when you come into some of our, certainly the Pan-African organizations that are based in the UK that do their events, you will come across libations. And I know that for some of us who aren't really aware of what libation is, even though intuitively, we know it and we see it, because often when our elders from wherever we come open a bottle of alcohol or whatever, they would pour some naturally to the ground, and that's libation that they're pouring. But we do this also ritualistically as part of the retentions of our African traditions, and we continue to do that in the UK or wherever we are. The reason why, again, I started with the libation is a form of unifying, or rather this particular libation day that we celebrated this year as well as last year, particularly because it's held in the US, but because of the pandemic, there was a call for us to do it worldwide, which is actually brilliant, because what we all then tasked to do is to, wherever we are, wherever the spaces we're in, this is the UK, wherever you are in the UK, you didn't have to gather physically, you just had to acknowledge on that day your ancestors and pour libation to them. And so this will obviously gather momentum and unify Africans across the continent and the diaspora. Similarly, there was an Ancestors Day in South Africa. I don't have images for that, but you can look up Ancestors Day in South Africa and see that it was a similar call, and actually it went out on South Africa TV, but there was some kind of backlash because obviously the Christians thought that this was evil and this was worshiping the devil and so on. So there was some backlash, but there's a movement to institute that particular day. This is the one in South Africa. But we'll try and see why some of our traditions get the press. It does, no matter where we are. We could be on the continent, we're in the diaspora, we still as we're trying to practice and live our way of life as African people, why we are given, why it gets so much of a backlash. And just going back to those slides that you were seeing before, the importance of recognizing in this moment the beauty and the power of ancestors when we are in distress, when we are having to fight a particular battle. So that's what those clips, those slides were showing, that we can call on our ancestors to help us. We invoke their power and we invoke their energies to bring about the changes, to bring about the healing, whatever it is that we want, to acknowledge our continuity with them. Now, part of this presentation was inspired also by this clip that you're about to see, which is talking about the rise of African indigenous spirituality in the UK, which I was interviewed for a whole day. They came to the house during lockdown last year and interviewed myself, and then later interviewed some others about the practice. Although that was a whole day, we got about 5 minutes worth of it, which was shown on BBC TV. So let's look at it and then we can talk about it afterwards. It's about 5 minutes long.
Now, this year's Black History Month is about to enter its final week. For many, it seemed to hold added significance this year, as recent demonstrations on racial equality have caused us to reflect on our colonial past. It has also led to people exploring their roots, which for some has led to a spiritual shift. And Sofa Kangwa went to investigate.
For centuries, Africa, like many places, has had its own indigenous spiritual practices and faiths. But along with colonialism came a message that these belief systems weren't as sophisticated as the religions we are more familiar with today, and some turned away from them towards faiths like Christianity. But for some people, that spiritual journey is being reversed. With a new sense of empowerment and connection to the past, a growing number of people are turning away from the faith they inherited at birth and are exploring the traditional faith systems that were practiced by their ancestors. One of these faith systems is Ifa, based on a blend of indigenous beliefs, legends, proverbs and songs. Although not officially recognised as a religion here, it has been practiced by the Yoruba people in West Africa for generations. At the heart of the UK movement is Dr Michelle Asantewa.
The Ifa system is a way of life. It's about the individual trying to understand themselves, to understand who they are and to find their destiny and their path.
What have you seen happening recently, closer to home, here in the UK?
I've seen an increase in people wanting to practice African spirituality.
This belief system focuses on three components: Olodumare, the creator of heaven and earth, the ancestors, and the nature spirits, of which there are various gods and goddesses.
And Osun is the goddess of healing, of fertility, of abundance, of love, of joy. So the individual might go to Osun because they want those things to manifest in their life. We do a ritual where we go to the river to honor Osun, and that has grown in interest, especially young people, very much interested in understanding and taking part in ritual.
Two of these younger members of the Ifa faith are Iola and Naomi. Both were brought up in Christian families, but have recently turned to a belief system they feel relates more closely to them.
Well, without a doubt, there's been definitely a very powerful paradigm shift throughout the globe. And I think people have really been so oppressed that they're looking for answers, looking for meaning, looking for belonging. And so with all the trigger and the trauma and the crisis, it's actually literally brought us to a crossroads where we're searching for answers. And that is leading some people to look deeper into their spirituality.
I've been affected by racism throughout my whole life. So when I'm being told to go back to where I come from, even though I was born here, it forces you to go, to ask the questions, to discover your background.
African indigenous spirituality isn't limited to pockets of devoted followers. It's very firmly making its way through to mainstream Western media and pop culture. Beyoncé gave a nod to goddess Osun, a river deity and goddess of femininity and love, in her album Lemonade. And Marvel Universe blockbuster Black Panther featured scenes where the protagonist meets his late father in their ancestral plane.
The revolution will be live.
But despite the resurgence of these faith systems, they don't have legal recognition as religions here. Hello.
Hello.
And Stephen Chan, OBE, Professor of World Politics, thinks there's a long road ahead before that changes. How do you see this kind of inclusion and acceptance developing in the future?
Anyone can claim to be spiritually enlightened and try to develop a following, but it's going to be like in many other places, like in India, for instance, where it's going to take some time for those who claim to be spiritually aware actually to prove that they've got something to offer their congregations. This process is going to continue, but the next key stage is development of doctrine and belief and organization that people find credible.
Only time will tell if ether and the many other spiritual beliefs now being embraced by a new generation are successful in gaining official recognition in the UK.
Okay, so the fact is, whether or not it's successful in gaining recognition in the UK or not, it is a successful, it is a viable, it is an ancient form. So we were glad that they came and, they did what they had to do. This is the BBC, this is mainstream, this is media, this is how it always is going to work. We were actually pleased with the outcome, because at least this was for Sunday morning live, which is on a particular prime time when a lot of people are watching the TV and would have seen this. However, we who kind of know better know that the Dr. Chan, who came on afterwards as the voice of expertise on African spiritual systems, there were some issues with that clearly, and I hope you were able to pick that up. So what we did
now this year, actually,
I wrote to the BBC, and this is part of the letter that I said to them. The editing of Dr. Chan's contribution unwittingly contradicted his expertise. Ifa is one of the oldest traditions on the continent, which has a phenomenal body of literature pertaining to the cosmology of the Yoruba, ethics and moral codes that guide adherents to live their best life in harmony with nature and one another. Udu Ifa is an ancient philosophical corpus that would easily fit into a set of beliefs or doctrine if such terminologies were necessary to align it with other world traditional spiritual systems. Dr. Chan's points contradict this fact. I can only surmise that this has something to do with how the editors chose to contextualize this section, which ended with the misguidance that African spirituality and or Ifa does not have an organization or doctrines. This is somewhat poorly represented, and I'm sure was not the intention. However, this is the area many I've shared the clip with find contentious for obvious reasons. And it's precisely this reason that we have a petition, which I'll show you afterwards, needed to be included, and it wasn't, because African spirituality is not aiming to be organized with a recognizable doctrine as some other faith-based practices. It is a way of life for Africans, just as Hinduism is a way of life for Hindus. The distinction is that the disruption caused by slavery and colonialism has resulted in the continued marginalization and demonization of these practices, whereby there is wholesale ignorance about them. In the diaspora, they were outlawed during the slavery and colonial period, and these acts remain notably in areas like Jamaica and Guyana, among others. So basically, obviously, I was contending their editorial agenda, which even in posturing that people are returning to these indigenous practices because of racism and because of this Black Lives Matter movement was also, that was not the case. this was happening. This movement has been happening a long time, but because they have a narrative, they have an agenda, they squashed it all in. That being the case, obviously they responded to this letter and said, yeah, they will find other times to maybe do a longer piece or whatever. That never came about. But what happened was earlier this year, I think they rescheduled it, or they re-showed that same clip on another similar program. So for us, it's a continuing struggle to get recognition of African indigenous spirituality because of what I've written here, the myth representations about it. And let's listen to Brother Dalian Adofpo speaking on some of those myth representations.
You see, very often when we bring up the topic of African spirituality, the first thing people tell you is that, oh, what do you mean? That juju stuff, that obia, you know, that witchcraft. And it's a bit sad because when we say that, it's almost like saying Islam is IS or Christianity is the Crusaders who went around and killed thousands of people, all in the name of their God. We cannot conflate. Every system, everything in existence has a duality to it. There's a positive aspect to it, and then there's you could say a negative aspect that people choose to use. So what we call witchcraft is principles within African spirituality that people might use mainly for selfish gain. It's usually for their own gain. You know, it might be something material, it might be to make money, it might be to get a partner, and it's only for self-gratification. But remember, as I've said from the beginning, African spirituality is a system of finding your own power. It's about remembering why you decided to manifest in this body and live this life journey. So it has nothing to do with self-gratification only, because one of the ultimate purposes within African spirituality is that when you pass, you're held in a position of an ancestor, a person who lived such a life that people want to emulate that lifestyle. It's become, you're an inspiration to them. That's what African spirituality is. Witchcraft is just using principles within African spirituality for your own selfish gain.
Yeah, and I mean, at this time in our life, thankfully, there are lots of clips like this, information online that can guide you mostly correctly about what African spirituality is. But along the misrepresentations, as this is from a film that I'm hoping, I just put in fact, I knew what I was looking for. I wanted this particular image because it's always kind of disturbed me, along with loads of others that myth represent us. And this one, I don't know if any of you are able to recognize who it is supposed to be. This is like your Obia woman, your spiritualist African, Caribbean, because this is from Pirates of the Caribbean. But you can find, if you put in Obi, or if you put in anything to do with African spirituality from the perspective of Western cultural imperialism, you're going to get this kind of like, sort of, what is it, scary? It's just kind of, I mean, it might not even appear so scary to you, but when you see it, it's very ragged and kind of rough approach. But just to say that we might otherwise have this. So Her Royal Majesty Queen Mother Dewoti Desir, who is a Hanon of the Voodoo tradition, is like our real modern day Queen Mother, who is a Voodooisson, a practitioner of Haitian Voodoo. And so you can look her up and see the work that she does, and note that she doesn't have this look of like just, the work I do is kind of like, makes me need to look bizarre. This is the image that's on the left, is another one of a practitioner of African spirituality, particularly AT, because I'm stressing the AT because that gets a lot of the press, the bad press, if you like. And perhaps this might explain why. It's because for those of you who are, most of you will be aware that the practice of voodoo featured in our liberation struggle against the French and others in the Yeti rebellion. And this is Cecile Fatiman, who was a Mambo, a priestess, and Dutchy Bookman, who would have been, the other word for them would be Obi Man and woman. That's like what most of us will know. This is just an artist impression of them, just to get the other image out of our heads and to recognize that these priestesses and priests, if you like, practitioners, are powerful. They own their power, they own their spirituality, and they are also very beautiful. This is another clip that's going to be coming soon, a film called Theory of Voodoo, the Theory of Liberation. Just have a look at the trailer for it.
Bon Dieu blanc ou monté au fait crime, mais bon Dieu pas nous. A demandé nous faire ça qui bon. Bon Dieu pas nous qui bon pour nous. Parce que nous l'ordre pour nous venger tout mal blanc ou fait nous. Il promet c'est lui qui va diriger pour nous. C'est lui qui va vendre nous force dans j'arrête nous. Il exige faut que nous déchouquer tout symbole à portrait bon Dieu blanc yo qui toujours a fait nous crier. Qui remet boire lumière la vie qui éclaire dans genou. Demandez nous tout pour nous coûter voix liberté capé parler dans cœur nous chaque.
A theology of liberation is a set of principles, a set of canons that enable us again to think and act freely, morally, justly, and in consideration for others. Our task as voodooisans, there is no reason why we cannot take these things and we do not use these things to further ourselves, to make ourselves strong, to love each other, to embrace the principles of Pan-Africanism.
With Haitian Vodou as a quintessential expression of successful Pan-Africanism in action, how is it that it was never made a central feature of the modern Pan-Africanist movements? What did the movement miss about the potential of Vodou that now makes it the subject of scientific, cultural, and political focus?
Wherever I am in any form of environment, in any contact with any of the elements, I will recognize myself when I live by Vodou principles. In Vodou, we are one with the cosmos, and we, each and all, have the power to communicate with the other. We receive instructions from each other, obey and respect each other, every life form.
So that will be coming out soon. And the reason why, in terms of the context of the presentation, this is a production that is by the same brother that you saw, Brother Dalian Adolfo, who also produced Ancestral Voices 1 and 2, along with a book of the same name, Ancestral Voices, Spirit is Eternal. And the clips inserted in the documentary was actually filmed here in the UK. I was part of that filming. And just to show you that there are things that are happening in the UK that, for the most part, we're not aware about around African spirituality. And so look out for this film that will give a different perspective on African spirituality, which really is about the connection, or what indeed with the question it asks about its connection with Pan-Africanism. Because although I mentioned at the top that a number of the Pan-African organizations in the UK acknowledge to a point African spirituality, formerly it's something that kind of was given shod accommodation among the Pan-Africanists of Europe, obviously prior to, at the time of the rebellion Pan-Africanism understood the need to come together as Africans to defeat their enslavers. But later on, something happened in that period of the civil rights and so on, where it wasn't so obvious that African spirituality needed to play a significant part. That is changing now, of course, as that film will show. And part of the reason why this was underplayed is really the weight of Western cultural imperialism is to such an extent that you're trying to fight it on these different levels. If, for example, and I urge you to do this just as an experiment, if you put God into Google to do a search, these are the images that you're likely to get. Imagine being facing this in your life all the time. This is what you get. This is what God looks like. This is the image of God. And a lot of the work that we do around African spirituality is to challenge these perspectives, including through representing or representing God through African eyes and through African perspectives, as was done by this sister here, who faced sort of death threats, really, for so doing. This is when she decided to reimagine God as a Black woman, reimagine, or rather represent, this image of child and mother. And yeah, you can put in the chat if you so feel, when was this the case? When was this kind of taking place? And this is what she says here, that the sad thing is that the fear of change, of seeing the world differently, can cause people to say and do things that are truly destructive. That is the artist Harmonia Rosales. And for those of you who want to know when this is happening, this is 2017. So it's just a continuing battle to kind of change the perspective internally for us as Africans, and obviously externally for others who see us or the world through a particular lens and refuse to acknowledge that the lens just need to be wider. This is just to say that a little bit about African spirituality. Now, there is an organization that I'm one of the founding members of, called the African Diaspora Indigenous Spiritual Systems, or CADIS for short, where we are trying to do just the thing that they did mention in that clip about the legal recognition, and just challenging the British legal system to recognize that we have a right to have that recognition, so that we can practice freely and openly without this fear of prosecution, and anybody, or persecution rather, and anybody who continued to demonize or discredit our practices, then we would have recourse to legal action should we wish to do so. But also it's about education. The platform is really about education as well, because there are many of us who, when we're coming into this kind of awareness, we don't have any place to tell us what we need to be looking out for, and there are a lot of malpractices out there. That's true. So when we're thinking about what African spirituality is as well, or indigenous spiritual systems, there are, no matter where you go, there are these, we've come down to some of these tenets that represent African spiritual systems. That there is a belief in a supreme being, or supreme source of creation, and that there is a knowledge of an affiliation with natural forces. For example, the Orisha, one of those being Mami Osun, as we'll get to see shortly, the Loas, which is in the Haitian voodoo practice, the Abosom, which is in the Ghanaian system, the Netaru, which is in ancient Kemet, and so on. And then there's also work that we do with nature, which is when we might be termed an Obia woman or an Obia man. That means we are working with herbs. We are doing healing remedies and so on. And that practice, which is what Cecile Fatiman in the Haiti case would have been doing, she would have been an Obeah woman, or Nanny of the Maroons, she would have been an Obeah woman. She would have known how to use herbs. The difference is, of course, is that you can use these herbs to heal, and you can use these herbs to harm. Well, in the case of being enslaved, of course, you're going to use the herbs to harm your enslavers, which is what we did. And also understanding of and working across the realms of existence, which is where we will dream, we will try and understand what our dreams are communicating to us, and so on. Definitely one of the main connecting aspect of African spiritual indigenous practices is around ancestors, and actually ancestorhood, which means the work for the ancestors, thinking about your eldership and becoming an ancestor, and so on. And then there's this whole idea of ritual, prayers, invocations. I've mentioned the libations, and all of these aspects of ritual are embedded in these practices, whether they be on the continent or in the diaspora. And this is just to mention the petition that I spoke of earlier, that we are seeking to raise. There are more signatures than this. This is from a few months ago. And if you're so moved, you can sign the petition, share the petition on our behalf as well. So the whole point of showing you all of that was to say that body, that council, is coming out of the UK. And we see it as, well, the UK claims that it, claims to have abolished, slavery. Well, then, if that is so being the case, then you can also abolish your attitudes towards African spiritual systems that are enmeshed still in your some of your acts, which is why I said that although it's in Jamaica, say, or in Guyana, say, some of these acts are still in place where our practices are outlawed, not recognized. And if I wanted to, say, use some of our knowledge systems to heal, I could come under a kind of a fire to say, well, there's nothing to say that you can do this legitimately. So, but we do that anyway. We do this, which is contesting what Dr. Chan was saying. This has been done for centuries, for forever. Africans have been using the working with the forces of nature, working with herbs. And so even though some people might go to practice Christianity, once they know of their indigenous and traditional systems, they will also use those when the time is needed too. So this is just from this book that I edited. Dr. Kimani Nahusi, again, who spoke about libation. Here he's written a little insert in it. He was talking specifically about Mami Wata, which is an engagement with the primal elements of water and the people in the African tradition, the first tradition of humanity, the one that provides the archetypes of culture the world over. I'm reading this just to illustrate to you, or to express to you how old African spiritual systems are, no matter which element of it that you find. He's citing here that Yemanja or Ulukun, Mami Osun, Oya, these are variations of principles and deities in modern West Africa, and the African diaspora announce connections to some of the earliest known examples of ourselves in the ancient Nile Valley, where Nu or Nun is the primal sea in which our ancestors in Kemet, told us that life began. These various divinities are portals leading to the house of our ancestors, a vast storehouse of knowledge, of a different way of knowing and living and celebrating life, acquired through unaccounted generations of observation. In other words, we've been doing what we've been doing, just as I've said, for as long as there is time. And we just need to start knowing that and practicing it where necessary. So whilst this little sound, this audio is playing, I would like you to really write in the chat, what is this statue and where do you think it's
Ajalaya, Ajalorun, Winnie Winnie, mi be mayansa, afifi sheje, efufu leje, yawao, oyao, ashe. Iba.
Oh, okay. I hope you were able to do that. And I'll keep going so that you can see. This is the shrine of Our Lady of Willesden. So the cult of St. Mary was revived in the early 20th century, but its origins are thought to be ancient. From the earliest time, the church had a patronal statue of St. Mary, and throughout the Middle Ages, Willesden was one of the best known villages in the vicinity of London. The reason being that St. Mary's Church possessed the famous shrine of Our Lady of Willesden, the Black Virgin of Willesden, to which miraculous powers were ascribed. By 1475, the shrine was amazingly popular, perhaps as a result of healings during the plague of the Black Death, thought by many to be a scourge of God. A source of pure, clear water was much valued in medieval times for drinking. Let's move along and see what else. Healings during the plague of the Black Death, thought by many to be a scourge of God. Okay, I've read that bit. A source of pure, clear water was much valued in medieval times for drinking and for cures. Pilgrims would come to pray, to be blessed with the water from the well, and take some water away in a small flask to anoint the sick and repeat the act of blessing. This is from the website, the Willesden website, but actually this is a quotation from it. The statue of St. Mary at the shrine, which existed in the medieval period, was destroyed during the Reformation, and it is thought it was burnt alongside other images of the saint in an iconoclastic event ordered by Thomas Cromwell in 1538. The current statue at the shrine of Our Lady, that's the one you've just seen, was made by Catherine Stern in 1972, and like the medieval predecessor, belongs to the ancient tradition of the Black Madonna. Carved in lime wood, this striking statue was placed in the church on the Feast of Corpus Christi in 1972 and dedicated at the annual pilgrimage later that year by the Bishop of Willesden. So there's so much that that I could say about this, but the fact of the destruction was taking place, that was so that they can then replace the ancient with something else. And this would have been happening throughout Europe. And I've written here for you to consider what ancient African deity does the Black Madonna refer to. But before we go on to that, I wanted you to maybe pause and realize how significant one of those forces of nature continues to be reflected universally, and that is the force of nature that is water. In our case, when we do our ritual at the river, is Mami Osun, and again, it's for her sweet waters that we go to for healing and for cures and for fertility and so on. So as most of you will have no doubt answered, the Black Madonna refers to a Mother Isis or Set, who is an ancient African or ancient Egyptian, which is Kemet aspect. And the picture where you see the image where it says before, that's her and her son Heru or Horus. Horus was the Greek name, as is Isis. And this cult of Isis, if you go to most of the Catholic churches across Europe, you will see it her reflected there. But of course, there was a period where they were just burning those statues, or they come up with all sorts of reasons why those images and statues were black. But the Pope and them know why, that it is, you know, it's black because it's a black woman. Obviously, over a period of time, that image, you know, changed. And as I said, they wanted to give us a different impression of what effectively the Trinity, or God, as I said before, will then look like. And it will look like where it's just three men, you know, and as it shows in the middle here, Horus, Osiris, and Isis, which is man, woman, and child, become man, 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 which from an African perspective doesn't quite make sense, because we're always dealing and working through the notion of balance. One of our symbols is of the goddess Neteru of Ma'at, which means balance, reciprocity. I just love this image, this impression of Ma'at here. And you know, you can look up Ma'at and see what she stands for. But the whole idea about balance anyway is that if there is, it's just to keep you balanced within yourself, because we recognize that the individual is empowered through the power of the feminine divine as well as the masculine divine, because we have those genders within us. But ultimately they're balanced in terms of their work in the community, their work in their lives, their work in their family, so that when they go into the afterworld, they go before what's called the Ma'at feather, which is weighed in the balance of their actions and their work and worth in life, and hopefully deemed to be good and honorable, whereafter they can then, you know, they can then have that tick that you've lived a well-balanced and a well-rounded life. If not, well, you have to kind of return and try that another way. These are the different impressions universally of that same mother and child, which of course, Western cultural imperialism eroded the power of the feminine divine and the woman, female energy. But still, universally, that image remains. Different iterations of the same. And this is just to go on a bit more about the importance of mother, or the feminine divine, from an African perspective. And this is from Dr. Charles Finch, who said that for Paleolithic man, every day was Mother's Day. The essential elements of advanced human culture were discovered or invented under the matriarchate. The motherhood first instituted the taboos and laws to govern human behavior, with a long-term project of taming, acculturating, and civilizing the male. These are not my words. The mother controlled fire, developed pottery making for storage and making of food. And as such was, you know, there was a time, he's arguing certainly, when there was a kind of an honoring of the woman, because man, you know, wasn't kind of conscious about how she was swelling and mimicking the earth producing. So they honored her, they worshiped the mother as God, because she was the one that would then give birth. It would take some time before they'd realize, oh, the male is doing this part, and then that part is enabling this to happen. But initially it was just, okay, she's swelling like the mouths of the earth, that swell, like a tree that produces and you know, and give fruit. She is God, she's like God. So anyway, you can look up this video on YouTube by Dr. Charles Finch, and this is him going on further. In the early matriarchal phase, the mother is creator, nurturer, and preserver, but she's also destroyer of the sacred king. Life issues from her at birth and return to her at burial, the womb of the earth, which is why also she was seen as the source of all adoration as well as terror. And this is him really talking deeply as well about the role of Isis or Horus and Isis and Oset, and her role in that relationship that she would have had with Oset long and deep story. Don't have time enough to go into all of it, but actually you can look that up as well, or it will show some of it in this clip. But this would be the Kemetic story, or the Kemetic religion via Osar and Oset, that story, and Eru. You need to just, you can look that up for more clarity on this information. I just wanted to give us an idea of how, from an African, certainly Kemetic perspective, women and mothering and motherhood plays a phenomenal role. And this is here talking about African spirituality as feminist. In almost all African creation myths, the female and male elements are equal, as I've kind of been indicating. There is no overarching supreme male god. In the Yoruba spiritual system, the creator of all, which is known as Olodumare, is sometimes said to be male, sometimes female. Furthermore, Olodumare is not almightily worshipped. Instead, Olodumare is said to have created deities whom people can worship and interact with. These deities are called the Orisha, and they too can be female and male, as is the case with for example, Osun is one of those. Orisha, Yimaya or Yimanja is one. Yimaya or Yimanja is twinned with Olokun, male, female. There is always this balance from African perspective. And this book here by Mama Zogbe or Vivian Hunter Hindru, this is the back cover that you're looking at here, where she writes that African women are the only women in the world whose ancient mothers were not born under the yoke of patriarchy. During ancient times, for the first 6,000 years, Africa was ruled by a powerful order of matriarchs. Considering the current status of African women around the world today, one could hardly be convinced that her matriarchal presence and the enormous influence she wielded in the ancient world had far exceeded the limited physical, cultural, geographical, and political designations of which Africa and her religions are confined today. During her reign, African religions had reached very high levels of theological and ritual development, and were the original spiritual home of the world's first great oracles or prophetesses and prophets. Under the rising role of African patriarchy, the sacerdotal priestly order, if you like, of sibyls were sold as slaves to build and work the powerful oracles they established in ancient Greece, Rome, Turkey, and Babylon. In other words, what Mama Zogbe is here arguing is that across the ancient world, and if we could just get our head around the fact that, you know, the ancient world expanded phenomenally, what we would come to know as Rome and Greece and so on. And there was a time when the African woman was, you know, was revered as what she's arguing here as prophetess, as oracle, as a sibyl. And, you know, kings and emperors would go to her to, you know, to divine and find out whether they were going to win the wars that they were entering and so on. So she's arguing that the Black woman of today fails to recognize this past history. And this here is just talking about how some of that oracular power manifested in, you know, in prophecies, through things like her going into trance and divining and healing and so on. So you can look at this book if you like, and that will give you more details, which I don't really have time to go into today. I wanted to bring to your attention this exhibition, which is currently on. I think it goes until October, and it's on at the British Library at the moment. And I just wanted to pay homage, I guess, to the fact that our sister here, Khadija Saye, who perished in the Grenfell fire in 2017, along with her mother, and that exhibition, she features aspects of African spirituality, thus, you know, as she was inspired. This is a photographic exhibition. As it's saying here, Saye weaves symbols of her Gambian heritage, most with spiritual significance. The 9 works form an extended meditation on spirituality, trauma, and the body. They reference both the Gambian and religious faith as sources of strength in the face of trauma, which for Saye included the experience of racism in Britain. And as she wrote, in these questionable times, we need positive imagery to push against the vile xenophobia and trash headlines. The work also weave connections to indigenous religion and to her Christian mother and Muslim father and their ancestors, which is what goes back to what I was saying about for Africans, we are having to straddle several traditions at the same time. It can almost be literally schizophrenic. And we can do several things in that. We can work through the reality that we have recent ancestors that would have taken on Christianity or would have had Christianity forced on them or Islam forced on them. But in all that, we would also have, we have our traditions, we have our times before that. So I was really pleased to see this. And this was a promising artist. She died at the age of 24, and this is where she was headed. And her Saya here photographs herself with branches of the Salvadora persica, the tree from which chewing sticks used as toothbrushes are taken. These signify purification as well as invocation of the spirits of the ancestors. And she was introduced to these by her mother. So do go and check out that, which is on at the moment. Also to mention, and this is from the book, that part of our practice, and remember that, you know, I'm talking, obviously, it might appear that it's all theoretical, but African spirituality is something that we do, we live, breathe, and practice. And this one here is showing, this image is showing an ancestor, a Mami Wata altar set up in, you know, Brother Sankara, Nana Sankara's, who contributed this photo to the publication In Search of Mami Wata. And this is to show, again, this was a workshop on these are two workshops that were done here in the UK at the Joe Marg Centre. The one on the left is an ancestor workshop teaching that I was showing how to set up a basic altar for your ancestors. You can see the items there. And then the one on the left is, this is a communal altar for Mami Osun. And all of the items there will have their significance, their relevances. And you could read that blog post that I did about this, just to show that increasingly African spirituality is sought after and practiced in the UK in its different forms. It's just that people need to be aware that it's taking place and how we're able to do it and how we're able to access it and the reasons for that. Just to link African spirituality to the one that we do here, the ritual that we do here at the river, to the annual Osogbo annual ritual to, it's a festival actually, to Mami Osun in Osun State in southwestern Nigeria. This is a sacred grove that hundreds and hundreds of people go to every year for a week-long festival in honor of the energy, the force of nature that is the river Orisha called Osun. And this is part of that river. And you can see there that it's been declared a sacred grove by UNESCO. And here is just saying about the importance of that grove, which is something we're trying to also, the importance certainly of mentally and spiritually embracing this connection to this force of nature. That the grove, certainly in Osogbo, will serve as a model of African heritage that preserve the tangible and intangible values of the Osogbo people in particular and the entire Yoruba people. And as a source of pride to them, the grove will remain a living, thriving heritage that has traditional landmarks and a veritable means of transfer of traditional religion and indigenous knowledge systems to African people in the diaspora, which is why we link with it. And increasingly, more and more people are linking with this tradition in the diaspora. So ours in the UK is a version of that connection. And this is just saying about who Mami Osun is, She is an Orisha of the Ifa spiritual system that comes out of Nigeria, and she represents the force of nature. The reason why this beautiful sister here is holding a knife is whilst Osun is gentle, loving, nurturing and so on, she is also very much a warrior and will defend her children at any cost. And this is just showing what it will look like, that festival. How big it is, and there is this calabash that is carried by a young sister who is a virgin, and she does that for, I think, a couple of years, and then it's passed to somebody else. And the attributes of Mami Osun are such that you see here on your right. She is about sensuality, healing, about beauty, and each of the Orisha will have their particular numbers, they will have their particular color, they will have their day of the week, and so on. And this is the one pertinent to Mami Osun. And this is the one that we do annually. This was last year, and this clip that you're going to quickly see here is from 20. This is a call for the one that was going to be last year, but this was in 2019. We're walking along this track to get to the spot where we're going to do our ritual. These are some of the offerings that we do. We create on that day that will then go into the river, and very much a family. Be able to. The idea of that. And this is just to show you more about what the offerings, how joyful these beautiful sisters are when we're doing the offerings. It's very much like you're bringing the energy to this space and to obviously yourself. Every part of those offerings are a reflection of the individual that's creating and making the offering. And these are, they call them Igbos, and these are them, you could do as much of this as you want, you could make it as flamboyant as you want. The symbol is abundance, the symbol is sweetness, the symbol is about healing, or the energy, it's about healing, about plenty, about the sweetness, because Mami Osun represents sweetness. These are some of them, and this is actually an offering to Yemaya as well. The Yemaya is the Orisha of the seas, but we actually went and did an offering to her on the left here, and then we went on the right to Ramsgate earlier this year. And oh, my, Mami Wata, oh, Maya, Mami Wata, oh, Maya, Mami Wata, oh, my, Mami Wata, oh, my, Mami Wata, oh, Maya, Mami Wata, oh, Maya, Mami Wata, oh. Thank you very much for listening. I need finally just to say that the last video that you saw, so that would be where any need that we're having, any issue that we're feeling, we would try to use a source, something that's natural to go to get the energy from, to relieve ourselves of that sensation. So we're working with nature all the time, but we can speak a little bit about that in the Q&A. This is just to show you the Ancestral Voices book that you can purchase. There's also video, and then this Holy Odu, which is one of those rare kind of books that it's a bit pricey, but it's worth it. So yeah, Tony, that's me done.
All right, so we're going to have a Q&A with Dr. Michelle Asantewa in about 5 minutes time. But first, I have to let you know about some other stuff that's coming up shortly that you might also be interested in. As you can see here, this is a bit about Dr. Asantewa, who publishes her own books, and actually she does editing and tuition. So if you have a book that needs to be reviewed, or if you need some help with writing a book, you can actually contact her for that sort of thing as well. So we're going to hear from Michelle a bit more. I should tell you that this event has been recorded, and in a couple of days' time, it will be put onto this website. So this is our YouTube channel. It's just youtube.com/blackhistorywalks. And this is where you'll find all of our, well, not all, some of our online lectures. So the ones that we do in association with the Sarah Parker Remond Centre are put on this website, and you can see them listed here amongst some other stuff about Black British history. On the top left, you see that one there that says British slave owners tracking the money in the stores of the enslaved. That is one that we did a couple of months ago, and it had 2,300 people logging in to check it out. And now you can watch it at your leisure in your own time by going to the website and clicking on that particular one. And basically what we did there is we tracked, I'll say we, the London slavery database tracked down where the compensation money went, the £20 million that was paid to British slave owners, where that money went to, who got that money, and indeed how they spent it. So that talk is about how you can use their website, and also is about some of the people who got money from owning enslaved Africans and how they profited from that, the behavior, and where that profit ended up. So that's quite an interesting lecture. But we have about, I think it's at least 10 lectures so far. And then of course, this will be added to this website as well. So if you're interested in this sort of history, you can go to this website here and you can spend ages checking out different aspects of Black British history, in particular, the lectures that we've organized in association with the Sarah Parker Remond Centre. I did mention our Black History River Cruise. Now that date, of course, is gone. The next one is the 29th of August, but that date is full. So the next one that has room is going to be the 3rd of October. And we can see a little sample of what happens in the river cruise in this clip here. Check this out.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, I've been teaching history myself for the last 30, 40 years, but what I saw today, I think Black History Walks is taking Black history onto new levels, open up new grounds. The people, the boat itself, the music, the information was absolutely first class, and I was proud to be a part of my culture, being on this boat. That everyone's got to come on an experience like this. Fantastic.
It was a beautiful day, very nice. We had the weather, the warmest day of the year, so yes, beautiful. Really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed the boat trip. I thought it was a wonderful experience, a wonderful way for us to learn our history. It's kind of live history, you know what I mean? Because we're sailing past buildings and stuff that we've probably sailed past or driven past or walked past 100 times, never knew the significance of that building.
I'm just blown away by the boat trip, I really am. I didn't understand that it was actually picking out all the historical contributions that our people had made along the river and what it all meant. I didn't understand that that's what was happening. People got what they wanted. It was a beautiful day, beautiful and sunny. So people had that. There was the river, there was a bit of drink at the bar, there was loads of information from SI. And the characters were amazing. So yeah, it was great. I would recommend it to anybody to come.
All right, so that's a bit about the boat trip. The next available one is the 3rd of October. August is full. So the next available one is going to be the 3rd of October. Now, if you're interested in this event today about spirituality, you should also be logging on to this event on Tuesday, I think it is, where we're going to hear directly from Erna Brodber. Now, if you've never heard about Erna Brodber before, well, ask yourself why not, but because she is a Jamaican international literary legend for her writing, and she is taught and studied at universities around the world. She's not that well known in our community for some odd reason, but Dr. Michelle Asantewa has tracked her down, and Erna Brodber has actually agreed to travel some distance to be at a place which has Wi-Fi so she can participate in this online talk about her work. So this is a very, very, very rare event to have Erna Brodber speaking live. She's in Jamaica right now. She's in the kind of the very country area. So she's actually traveling for several miles to get to this Wi-Fi spot. And she's going to be interviewed by Dr. Michelle Asantewa about her work and her legacy and her thinkings on African history and spirituality. Because when you read her books, she has African spirituality in her books that it's like throughout the entire kind of text. So if you haven't got a ticket yet, get your free ticket for this, log on, make sure you can check out, because it's a very unusual and very rare opportunity to hear her talk. Other than that, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 events on this page, and that's out of 22. So as I said before, a lot of our events are free. These ones that you can see here are all free, and there's probably something that appeals to some aspect of your interest or personality, from African films, from mental health to the Black Panthers in the UK. We actually have Dr. Beverly Brand, who's also in Jamaica. She's joined us online to talk about her role in the Black Panthers in Brixton, in his country, what she did, and her legacy after that. So you have a whole bunch of really interesting events you can find out there. The website is just blackhistorywalks.co.uk, blackhistorywalks.co.uk, and you can see all of these events there and a lot more besides. I mentioned we show films. So we normally show films at the BFI South Bank, which is a huge cinema not far from Waterloo Tube Station. We have a whole season of events on Britain's first Black movie star. That's a guy called Earl Cameron, and that's on until the 14th of August. And you can check those out either on our website, blackhistorywalks.co.uk, or the BFI website. Just look for African Odysseys. But these are films that star Earl Cameron from the 50s, 60s, 70s, because he was a big star at that time. His work has often been overlooked, but we're going to highlight it and focus on it. I'm going to have his contemporaries speaking on stage about the man and his legacy. Errol Barra, Freedom Fighter, that's an online film, very rare online film. Well, not very rare, but it's very unusual, put it that way. We're showing that on the 20th of August, 7 p.m. And we'll have the director and producer online to do a Q&A about their film. The film is about a World War II Barbadian bomber pilot rather, navigator I should say as well. And he then went on from being in World War II to becoming the first elected leader of his country, Barbados, back in the 60s, and has an amazing story. The one on the left-hand side, the Black History Comedy, that's a compilation of different comedians who use African history as a way, they use comedy as a way of telling African history. So we got people like Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, Key and Peele, a whole bunch of Black comedians who will make a joke using African history in the joke. We're going to show you what is true and what's not true from their commentary. So that's another unusual event taking place. I think that's in October, I think, but it's on the website. And this is a bit more about Mr. Earl Cameron, a real legend. We're going to honor him over the next 3 weeks at the BFI South Bank. Films, Q&A, workshops, etc. all can be found on our website, or you can go to the BFI African Odysseys page as well. And again, this is just a list of some of the stuff we've got coming up. More than half is online, more than half is free, and they're all kind of educational, uplifting events. But for now, we're going to hand back to Dr. Michelle Asantewa to take some questions in the chat function. So if you've got a question for Dr. Michelle Asantewa, just type in the chat function and then she will just take them from there. So Michelle, over to you
again. Greetings again. I hope you can hear me still. There are quite a number of questions. I don't know whether it's me or Tony that's feedbacking or what.
Oh, sorry, Michelle. Yeah, you just go ahead with what ones you've noticed. Now take care of the rest.
All right, thanks. There's one that always comes up about where one can practice Ifa, because there's some in the Q&A bit, and that is that I don't have the answer for that one, because no matter there's like an international council of Ifa religion, but there's not one that we know of that is based in the UK. Bear in mind that a lot of these practices have been forced for so long underground that they might be there, but they're just not exposed, which is why we set up this council to try and, you know, encourage as much exchange as possible, and to find out those practitioners wherever they are and show and put them up on that platform. But otherwise, we get together at some of these rituals and some of the presentations that we're currently doing as well online to try and widen that kind of space, if you like. Paul, you're saying, how can people from the diaspora reconnect with ancestral traditions? Again, certainly by doing the rituals, as I've mentioned before, the rituals of setting up an altar to your ancestor. That was like a basic principle of doing it. And I would look on that blog post that I shared through my Way with Words spiritual creative account, and that will show you how you would set up an ancestral altar, because it really starts with you being proactive in doing that. And then any of the events that you see coming up around the ancestors or the Ifa system, just try and connect with the people that are putting those on. But for me, the main thing is that you try to set up an altar, which relates to another question that somebody was asking, which let me just see if I can find it and get the name. This is Jen. She's saying that some of our ancestors were strong and also suffered with wars and illnesses, etc. So why then call on them when they were just as vulnerable? And then there's two parts. She's saying, or are we saying their strength comes from death? What we're saying is that, you know, it's about energy and about the transformation of energy which takes place throughout the life cycles. And so whilst in the material reality, we might not have an understanding of, you know, how to deal with certain things. On the spiritual level, in the spiritual realm, that can actually change. And so we call on those ancestors because they have gone through the cycles and they're now on the other side. And so they have a different perspective, if you like, on things, and that they can heal us as we're seeking it. And we likewise can heal them from some of those things by calling on their names and by pouring water to, you know, libation to them, by when we make a little food, a little offering it to them, we kind of heal them as they are healing us which links to another question that somebody else was asking about, which is Hero, about how I view the relationship between materiality and spirituality. Well, from an African perspective, an African spiritual perspective, these realms are interrelated. The spiritual informs the material, and the material informs the spiritual. We animate the ancestors. We animate, as in our material reality. We animate some of the aspects, like the river and the water. You know, there are people who can make the drum to the water. You know, drum with the water. There are so many things that we can do with nature that we take for granted, and you can't see the energy that is taking place, just like we can't see how necessarily electricity is really happening, but we know it is happening. We see a physical way that it's happening, but deep down we don't really know. Just as there's lots of things we don't know that's invisible, but ultimately manifest in particular ways. So from an African traditional perspective, we work with the invisible realm to inform the material realm. So it's interrelated. I'm just trying to get through some of these questions. Who do you call on as an ancestor if you have no family? Well, your ancestor goes right back to the beginning, you know, and you don't, from an African perspective, you have family. You can't not have family. So I don't really know what that question is pointing to, but even if you don't know your family, say, you don't know who your family are, you know that you are an expression of something that came before you, or some formation that put you there. So you would say, you know, like in my case, when I, for example, don't know the names of my paternal grandparents, I might just say my father's mother, you know, because I know my father would have had a mother and a father, and so on. So, and then there are the wider ancestors. You know, we are people that we wouldn't have just been talking about the biological. We're talking about beyond that as well, becoming our ancestors. So, okay. Lisa Mayer, specifically, does anyone know about locations in London where learners can meet, learn and practice Ifa? Again, this is the same thing about expecting there to be places. What certainly can happen is people can start to be more creative in creating those spaces. And I was just, as I was speaking, getting a call from somebody who was asking the very question a few days ago. So more and more we're having these questions, and we don't have those spaces for obvious reasons, but we are working on it. You certainly can, if you come to the Erna Brodbar lecture. I know that Erna Brodbar has created what she calls Black Space, which is doing exactly the kinds of things that you're talking about. And she does that in Jamaica. But we here doesn't have a thing where, say, we're practicing our Africans. We don't have a place, a space, but we're working on those, of course. So, okay, Tony, I'm just going to come out. That was in the Q&A function, and I can't remember what the others. How often do we pour light? Let me go up. Tony, do you want to fire a question at me? Because I think is Tony still here?
I'm here at the moment.
Someone
says, how does this manifest in Maroons in the Caribbean? That's a question from the bottom.
How does what manifest in the Maroons?
I think spirituality, maybe. And you also got another question from Jen. How often do we pour libations on global days, or as often as we want?
The Maroon community in Jamaica are connected with African traditional spiritual system because they separated themselves from their enslavers and retained these traditions. And so, you know, that's why we have Nanny, as I said in the presentation, she was a herbalist, she was a healer, she was the matriarch, if you like, she was the nurse, she healed people's wounds. Yeah, so they would just observe nature just in the same way that as they would have done on the continent prior to enslavement. It's a given that they would use the things that they're aware of, that you know, the herbs and the healing, the songs, the drumming, all the rituals. They would have what's called Pokamania. That's their African-derived spiritual system. Kumina. So yeah, so that would be a removed tradition within the diaspora in the Jamaican context. What was the other one? I can't remember.
There was a question about how often are you supposed to pour libations?
One of the things that we need to bear in mind is that there are part of the reason why people can't handle or understand African spirituality is because we are so used to being prescribed. We are so used to someone somewhere outside of us telling us, do this today, do this like this, and so on. But from African traditional perspective, there are times when you come together as a community, and there are times when you are having a unique experience with the creative force. And there are times when you are going to be therefore having that unique experience with the ancestors to whom you pour libations. You can pour libation anytime you really want to. You don't have to wait for something. And you don't have to also think that you need to do it often, all the time, in this particular way. So when I do the workshop on ancestors, I try to make it be as fluid and as light as you can imagine. Just like, for example, if I want to talk to my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, I can just talk to my grandfather. You know, I don't have to do something specific necessarily to say, right now, I'm going to be holy today and have a communication with my grandfather. I'm going to pour libation like this today, because no, we need to start accessing the natural, divine, creative forces within us that's called our intuition, and work from that, because you have a divine and spiritual intelligence that for the most part we're not activating. And when we start to activate that intelligence, something, therefore, if you want to call it that way, will say, you need to pour some libation to your grandfather or to your whoever, to your auntie so-and-so, to your whatever, now, today, do it like this. And no one can say to you, no, it's Sunday, you know, or no, it's the Sabbath, or you will just know and you will do it. So probably the first thing I should really say is you need to start finding ways to tune in and align with your intuition, because many of us are sort of distant and removed from that. But we need to tap into that, and though some of these questions that you're asking will filter through to your own intuitive process. No, you're right. We're aware of that, Victoria Hayford. Do we need UK recognition? What we're saying is it's not just about that, it's about the fact that when we separate ourselves to a certain degree as well, what doesn't happen is if we want a day off work because that day we are going to observe Osun or whatever it is, whilst the Hindu might get that day off or that hour or whatever they want to go and pray, the Muslim, whatever they want to do, a person who is African that wants to acknowledge something that is African spiritually related, they won't have that, because it's not recognized anywhere. There's no one, you know. But if we have it recognized, they can say, this is it, it's legitimate, give me my hour in the wherever, what I need to do. It's things like that. That's just giving you an example of why we're pushing for it as well. So anything else I'm missing? I know you might have to run off in a minute. Does anyone else have a question that I'm missing? Because I think Tony also said that he might have to leave. So he might have gone. Oh, but therefore you can't unmute yourselves? Oh dear, that's not good, is it? Okay, Tony might have had to run off because I know he had to go. But there was a question, another question that somebody asked at the beginning. Let me go to the top here in the Q&A, which he was saying about, I want to ask you, this is it Shumiel Yerushalmi? I want to ask you if you can to expand about influence of African spirituality in London on general, non-Africanian population of the capital of the United Kingdom, among others, if non-Africanian residents of London participate in Africanian, I think it's African spiritual events and celebration in the city. Thanks. I'm not really sure about the question, but I wonder if you're trying to ask me about what do I think about non-Africans participating in African spirituality. Is that what you're asking? I don't even know if you're here. It's one of those ones, isn't it? I mean, to be honest, African spirituality we call it African spirituality and African spiritual system just because we're trying to distinguish it and we're trying to elevate it. But ultimately, you know, no one would ask that question about Buddhism. So if you want to honor the one of the first, you know, spiritual systems, you know, known to mankind, then do so. Okay, the thing is with this is that I'm literally now having to do it by myself. And so I'm having to engage with you through the chat function. I can see someone talking about the commercial, like the commercial. Note that in Nigeria, there are always going to be a commercial aspect to anything anyway. And so it's about who the custodians really are and how well we ensure the practice is done or continues with integrity. Christianity is commercialized, you know, and we're all familiar with that. So we're not trying to overload our spiritual systems with obvious projections when already we're aware of that. We're aware of the potential for abuse because we know that that exists in all forms, in all systems anyway. Sorry, I'm just trying to go through some of the questions on my own. Okay, there's Carl Williams who is making a suggestion about, for those of you who are interested, take a trip to the African continent, the coast of Ghana, and visit the slave, the dungeons where our enslaved ancestors were. Then you'll understand why Europe and the America destroyed our African spirituality. I mean, thank you for that, Brother Carl. Yeah, I certainly did have the opportunity to go to the continent and see those dungeons. What was interesting about that and what has been happening is that Africans, especially from the US, are more and more increasingly going and making that a pilgrimage. So you could probably start there. You know, it's quite traumatic, but it does kind of realign, it kind of reconfigures some rattling in your head about your ancestors. And certainly if it doesn't do the head thing, it does the heart and it does the spirit, because you can still feel the vibration, the energy of the ancestors who were put in those dungeons in preparation to be then shipped across to no man's land, really, where we still ultimately are floating around. Okay, I think I've answered most of the questions, but I can still see them, and we've got till 8 o'clock, haven't we? Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, we're going up. Thank you all for your comments, and I do hope to see you again on another session. I'm looking, trying to go up still to see whether there are any other questions. Is Aoife open to all races? This is from Hazel. I don't know if she's still here. Just curious, as I noticed a white lady at the river event in London. The long and short answer is yes. Just in the same way as one of the things that a lot of us did who are on this journey would have told you that we probably went to Buddhism. You know, you went around, you know, because there wasn't anything that was like evidently ours. So we just went into these other places, and, you know, no one in Buddhism said, get out of my temple. But Aoife is the same, because Aoife is working, there is no, that's the Aoife system, you know, and they don't see that. And spiritually, I should probably bring it to Comfort, what I know. Part of Comfort, Guyanese Comfort, they have ethnic spirits. So if you go into, let's say you go into a trance state, you could manifest an ethnic, what they call an ethnic spirit. So you could manifest a European, you could manifest a Chinese, and they can tell this by the different things that the spirits call for. And also over a period of time, as Dr. Kimani Nahusi was saying, periods of observation is how we come to determine and how we're able to interpret what is taking place. So in the Guyanese Comfort situation, also actually in Haitian Vodou and any of them, they all have different ethnicities, because of course, removed from the continent, you entered into a space where there are other ethnicities, but within the context of the continent, we are the origins of humanity, of human form. So Aoife, you know, Aoife is coming out of that system where there wouldn't have been, you know, you're black, you're white, you know, you're whatever. So yeah, there's no discrimination kind of there. Okay, so another question. I'm going to take it to the top to about 8 o'clock. Thank you all again for your comments. Hello, Karina, you're on here. Okay, who's calling from China? Okay, it's Hirong Chen. I answered your question earlier. Hello, greetings. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Yeah, we're getting there. I think we've answered most of the questions, right? Okay, thank you very much. Let me see. It's so hard to find these messages and just. Do you have? This is from Nicole Kolawole. Do you have any advice for those of us trying to connect with our ancestors but still live at home amidst family who don't resonate? Do I have any advice? I live at home with my mum, and I would say that most of my members of my family will probably think I'm crazy and don't acknowledge what I do. most of them are Christians. And, you know, when I started to set up my altar, I'm a bit like, I'm just gonna, me, you know, you have to explain to me to the point where it's so clear, it's so evident why I shouldn't be doing this thing, you know. I'm kind of a bit of an own way, like, you know, I just think, no, this works for me, I'm doing it. So I don't watch anybody's face. And I know that that is difficult. Unless your parent, they're going to throw you out or whatever the thing is that they're going to do. I would just do my thing. You know, if you're, whatever the space is, you set up your ancestor, your altars, or even like, if you don't want to do that, at least go to a space outside where you can acknowledge your spiritual self, where you can connect with the tree, with the river, with the rain, with the moon, with the sun. All of these things are part of our practice. And you know, adorn yourself, bring flowers into your home, you know, surround yourself with nature, plants, you know, just do your things organically as you're connecting, and don't speak to too many people. I'm trying to advise you, Nicole. Try not to have to speak too much. I think just do what you're doing. And when they ask you questions, say, oh, you know, this is for my, you know, my ancestors or whatever. If they argue, you don't need to argue back. You just say, this is what I want to do. And you just do it. It depends on where you live, of course, but if you have your own little room, just create your own little space. For me, I mean, yes, they kind of scornful, my deeper family, but thankfully my mum is very much embracive of it. So, but that took time, but eventually, obviously now she is. You took your altar down before we felt too much negativity. I respect your approach. Thank you. Yeah, and yeah, once you're starting to feel this, Nicole, again, once you're starting to feel that confidence, you know, just do it boldly. Yes, there is going to be fallout. I'm not going to pretend that there's not, but you have to just be on it, like, as in, this is my altar, this is what I'm doing, and don't watch their face. They'd have to smash it up, you know, but they're not going to smash it up. And you could just have it basic if you want a water, candle, you know, your picture and stuff like that. I know it's really difficult living, you know, on your own. And for a long while I was, you know, I was on my own and able to do it, but I just bulldozed my way into just allowing it. But as I said, members of my family just don't even really engage with me. And probably the only one that does is my mum in terms of spirituality. So it's unless you find like-minded, it can be a really difficult journey. But I just say hang in there, and it's as much as you can go into spaces where the ancestors know they'll come to you, because they know that they know your intent and they know your heart. And so do that, you know, pour your libation to them, and whenever you want. And that's one way as well. You know, when you have your plant, if you're surrounded by a plant, pour your libation in the plant. And so you're doing it, but you don't necessarily have a focal point, which can then be, you know, create that confusion. Okay, I'm just gonna move down. So trying to move down. Thank you so much, Nova. So good to have you on here. Yeah, I know what you're saying, Carl, about the legal, it's not legal representation, but we are speaking to, because there are people and systems and places where there are things that we're not allowed to do, and that's why, as I said before, that's why we do things, but we're doing things underground, which is why, again, we're asking these questions. People are asking us questions, but we can't direct them to the practitioners easily, because a lot of the practitioners just do their things in this secret way, which some of us are happy about. But what then happens is that there are others who are doing things in a secret way that are actually abusing people. It's a long discussion, a long debate, which we ourselves in the council are having to make sure that we are setting the tone right, getting it right. Thank you, everybody. I think I have talked myself out, because this is not like where it's like the meeting format where you can actually talk back to me. So I'm just having to scroll down and read, and that's kind of a bit difficult. So I just really I hope you can. It's really strange. I've got from Dr. Asantewa to hosts and panelists. How can we register? Have I got somebody that's hacked myself, hacked me? It's really weird. What is that? How can we register for your? Oh, that's so weird. So there's a, I don't know if anyone else is on here. Can you see that question, or am I just losing it? From Dr. Michelle Asantewa to the hosts and panelists, how you won't be able to see it. How can we register for your Dr. Erna Broadbent conversation? I don't even know if anyone else can see that, because anyway, I'm just going to ignore that random question. But if anybody really seriously does want to register for the Erna Broadbent conversation, you just go on Eventbrite and look for Dr. Erna Broadbent, go on Black History. Oh, thank you. You can't see it, Kwame, but it came to the hosts and to the panelists, but that's just, it's just giving me jitters as in how that's happening. Anyway, you can register via Black History Walks Eventbrite page for the yeah, I can see that question again. Anyway, I think we're done here. That's what I think. I thank you all for being on this presentation, this talk. I bid you a really brilliant rest of your Sunday evening, whatever you're doing. Thank you for taking time out to joining us for the presentation. And I look forward heartily to seeing you again on another one of these sessions. Have a blessed evening. All right, bye-bye.